The desert sun hung low over Route 66, painting the Arizona sky in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. Long
You think you
shadows
can just
stretched
walk
across the
away?
cracked
I'm on
asphalt,
the
reaching toward
rights.
Betty's
Not
highway
anymore, you
diner,
don't.
like dark
We're done
fingers
here.
grasping for something just out of reach. A single Harley Davidson sat in the far corner of the gravel parking lot,
The
black paint
situation has
dulled by
escalated. We
1,000
need to
miles
move.
of road
What do you
dust.
mean? What's
The
happening?
engine
This
ticked
is bad.
softly
We
as
have
it
to
cooled
go.
metal,
Oh,
contracting
dear.
in the November
Just a
chill
small cut.
that comes
This
when
will
the
help.
sun begins its
Oh, I
descent.
see.
Will it leave a
Jack
scar?
Reaper
No, it
McAllister
should
sat
heal
astride
well.
the bike, one boot planted on the ground, watching the diner through narrowed eyes. At 58, his face carried the map of a hard life, deep lines etched by sun and sorrow, a jaw that hadn't softened with age, and eyes that had seen things most men only have nightmares about. The kind of eyes that don't blink first. His right hand rested on his thigh fingers, drumming a rhythm only he could hear. An old habit from the Corps, 4 taps, pause. 4 taps, the same pattern he drummed on his rifle stock in the Saudi desert, waiting for orders that would send him into the storm. That was 28 years ago. Operation Desert Storm. 6 months that had turned boys into soldiers and soldiers into ghosts. Jack had come home with a Purple Heart shrapnel scars across his ribs and a nickname that followed him like a shadow reaper. Some men got their nicknames from acts of heroism. Jack got his from staying alive when everyone around him didn't. In his left hand, he held a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. No ribbon, no card, just the box creased at the corners from being gripped too tight. Inside was a silver brooch shaped like an angel, its wings spread wide, its face serene. It had cost him $300 at an estate sale in Tucson. $300 he'd saved over 6 months, setting aside 20 here, 50 there, until he had enough. His mother deserved more than a $300 brooch. She deserved the world. But the world doesn't fit in a box, and all Jack had left to give were small gestures and broken promises. 82 years old today, he murmured to himself, his voice rough from disuse. 82 years, and she's still serving coffee to people who don't even see her. He checked his watch, a battered bulova his father had given him the day he shipped out to boot camp in 1985. The crystal was scratched, the leather band held together with duct tape, but it kept perfect time. 6:17 in the evening. His mother's shift ended at 6:30. Same as always. 13 years she'd worked at Betty's diner, and she'd never been late, never called in sick, never asked for a single day off. Some people called that dedication. Jack called it survival. Through the diner's wide front window, he could see her moving between tables, a coffee pot in one hand, that same warm smile on her face she'd worn his entire life. Martha Louise McAllister. 82 years of quiet strength wrapped in a pale blue uniform and a white apron that had been washed so many times the fabric had gone soft as silk. Her hair, pure white now, was pulled back in a neat bun. She moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to compensate for weakness, each step deliberate, each motion controlled. But Jack could see what others missed, the slight tremor in her left hand when she poured the coffee, the way she steadied herself against the counter for just a moment when she thought no one was looking. 8 months ago, his mother had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. 8 months, and she hadn't told him. He'd found out by accident, spotting a prescription bottle when he'd helped her move a box in her bathroom. Carbidopa levodopa. He'd looked it up on his phone right there standing in her hallway while she hummed an old hymn in the kitchen and felt his heart crack like old leather. When he'd confronted her, she'd waved it off like it was nothing. Everyone gets old Jackie, she'd said, using the nickname she'd called him since he was 5 years old. Hands shake, joints ache. It's just part of the journey. But it wasn't just part of the journey. It was her body betraying her cell by cell, and she was facing it alone because she didn't want to be a burden. Because that's what Martha Louise McAllister did. She carried her pain in silence so others wouldn't have to carry it for her. Jack's jaw tightened. He'd learned a lot of things in the Marines. How to strip and reassemble an M16 in 42 seconds, how to stay awake for 72 hours straight, how to kill a man with his bare hands if the situation required it. But no one had taught him how to watch his mother grow old. No one had taught him how to help someone who'd spent their entire life helping everyone else. A flash of memory hit him, sudden and sharp as a knife between the ribs. His wife Sarah lying in a hospital bed, her hand in his, her voice barely a whisper. "Promise me you won't disappear," she'd said. It was 3 days before the cancer took her, 3 days before Jack's world ended. "Promise me you'll stay close to Grace. Promise me you won't let grief turn you into a ghost." He'd promised. He'd held her hand and looked into her eyes and sworn on everything holy that he wouldn't let the darkness swallow him. And then he'd broken that promise. For 18 months after Sarah's death, Jack had vanished into himself. He'd stopped answering his phone, stopped returning calls, stopped showing up to Sunday dinners at his mother's house. His daughter Grace had tried to reach him. 63 phone calls over 18 months. He'd answered 4 times, and even then, he'd barely said more than a handful of words. "I'm fine. Just need time. I'll call you back." He never called back. Grace was 35 now, a cardiologist in Phoenix, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She was brilliant, compassionate, successful. And she hadn't spoken to him in 4 months, not since the last time he'd let her call go to voicemail. The guilt sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and cold. Jack exhaled slowly, watching his breath mist in the cooling air. The sun was almost gone now, just a sliver of gold on the horizon. Inside the diner, the lights had grown brighter, warm yellow against the gathering darkness. He was about to start the bike, about to ride across the parking lot and walk through those doors and hand his mother the angel brooch and pretend everything was fine when a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class pulled into the lot. Jack's eyes tracked the vehicle automatically, a soldier's instinct that never fully goes away. The car was new, gleaming out of place in a gravel lot surrounded by dusty pickups and aging sedans. Dealership plates. California tags. The engine purred to a stop and the 2 people stepped out. The man came first, mid-40s, tall, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jack's bike. His hair was perfect, swept back with just enough gel to look styled but not slick. Rolex on his wrist, Italian leather shoes that had never touched anything rougher than a boardroom floor. The woman followed a moment later. Early 40s blonde, wearing a designer dress and sunglasses that cost what most people spent on rent. Her heels were red, bright, aggressive red, and clicked against the gravel like a judge's gavel. Jack watched them pause at the diner's entrance, watched the man say something that made the woman laugh. Not a real laugh, the kind of laugh people make when they're performing for an audience, even if the audience is just themselves. Something about them set Jack's teeth on edge. Maybe it was the way they carried themselves, like they owned every space they walked into. Maybe it was the way the man checked his phone before opening the door, like whatever was happening in the digital world mattered more than the real one. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe Jack had just spent enough years reading people to know predators when he saw them. He dismounted the Harley in one smooth motion, his boots crunching on gravel. The box with the angel brooch went into the inside pocket of his leather jacket, settled right over his heart. The diner door closed behind the couple, and through the window, Jack watched them choose a booth. Not just any booth, the one his mother was currently wiping down her back to them, her movements slow and careful. Jack started walking. The distance from the far corner of the parking lot to the diner's front door was maybe 60 yards. Jack covered it in 45 seconds, his stride long and purposeful. The old warning signals were firing in his brain, the ones that had kept him alive in combat zones and bad neighborhoods, in all the dark places in between. Something was wrong. He couldn't name it, yet couldn't put words to the feeling, but it was there. A pressure in the air like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. His hand touched the diner's door handle just as he heard raised voices inside. 20 minutes earlier, Martha Louise McAllister had been having a good day. Oh, her hands were shaking more than usual, and her left knee had been aching since noon. But those were just facts of life now. Background noise. She'd learned to work around them the same way she'd learned to work around every other hardship life had thrown at her over 8 decades. The dinner rush had been steady but manageable. Truckers stopping for coffee and pie. A family with 2 small children who'd left a mess but tipped well. Old Joe Brennan, who came in every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork, always ordered the meatloaf, always left exactly $3 on the table. Martha knew all their names, knew their orders, knew that Joe's wife had died 6 years ago, and he ate at the diner because going home to an empty house made the silence too loud. Knew that the truck driver who sat at the counter, the one with the faded Navy anchor tattoo on his forearm, had a daughter he hadn't seen in 4 years, and carried her picture in his wallet like a prayer. Knowing people, really knowing them, was Martha's gift. It always had been. Even when her body betrayed her, even when her hands shook, and her mind sometimes went foggy around the edges, she could still see people, really see them. Her husband Henry used to say she had a talent for making everyone feel like they mattered, like they were seen. In a world that had a habit of making people feel invisible, that was no small thing. Henry had been gone 20 years now. 20 years since the heart attack had taken him in the middle of the night, quick and merciless. She still missed him every single day. Missed his laugh, missed the way he'd called her Lou instead of Martha, missed the solid warmth of him beside her in bed. But she'd learned to carry the missing. It was just another wait, and Martha had always been good at carrying weight. She was wiping down booth number 7, humming an old Patsy Cline song under her breath when she sensed someone behind her. "Good evening, folks," she said, turning with her practiced smile firmly in place. "Welcome to Betty's. I'm Martha. Can I get you started with some coffee or—" The words died in her throat. The couple standing there weren't looking at her the way people usually did. There was no warmth in their eyes, no polite acknowledgement. The woman's gaze swept over Martha like she was evaluating a piece of furniture someone had left on the curb, potentially useful, probably trash. The man was worse. His eyes were cold, calculating. The kind of eyes that saw people as obstacles or opportunities, nothing in between. "Mrs. McAllister," the man said. Not a question, a statement. Martha felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No," the man replied, sliding into the booth without waiting for an invitation. The woman followed her red heels clicking against the floor. "But we know you. You own the property at 3847 Pinecrest Lane in Flagstaff. Nice little house. Been in your family a long time, I understand." Martha's smile faltered. "I don't discuss my personal business with strangers, sir." "We're not strangers," the woman said, pulling out a tablet from her designer handbag. "We're investors, and we have a business proposition for you." "I'm not interested in—" "$145,000, the man interrupted. His voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of someone used to getting what he wanted. "Cash. We can have the money in your account by Friday. All you have to do is sign." He placed a document on the table between them, pages already marked with bright yellow tabs showing where signatures were required. Martha glanced at the papers, but didn't touch them. "That house isn't for sale. Everything's for sale, Mrs. McAllister. It's just a matter of price." The man leaned back, supremely confident. "And frankly, at your age, living alone in a house that size doesn't make much sense. You work here, 40 hours a week? At 82, you're clearly struggling to make ends meet." The words landed like slaps. Martha felt heat rise in her cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "I appreciate your offer," she said, keeping her voice level through sheer force of will. "But that house was built by my husband. It's where I raised my son. It's not for sale at any price." The woman sighed, a theatrical sound of exasperation. "God, I told you this would be a waste of time, Brandon. She's one of those sentimental types who'd rather drown in debt than face reality." "Victoria," the man Brandon said mildly. Then he turned back to Martha, and his expression hardened. "Mrs. McAllister, I'm trying to be reasonable here. But let me be clear, we've already purchased 11 properties on your street. Yours is the only holdout. We're building a development that will bring jobs and revenue to Flagstaff. Your stubbornness is standing in the way of progress." "Then I guess you'll have to build around me," Martha said quietly. It was the wrong thing to say. Brandon's jaw tightened. Victoria's eyes flashed with something ugly and sharp. In that moment, Martha understood she wasn't dealing with reasonable people making a business offer. She was dealing with people who'd already decided what they wanted and saw her as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle. "You know what I see when I look at you," Victoria said, leaning forward. Her voice had gone cold, stripped of any pretense of civility. "I see a washed-up old woman clinging to the past because she's too scared to face the future. You're working in a diner at 82 because you failed at life. You couldn't hold on to your husband, couldn't build any real wealth, couldn't create anything of value. And now you're going to sabotage other people's success because you're bitter." Martha felt the words like physical blows. Her hands, already trembling slightly, began to shake harder. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "That's not true," she whispered. "Isn't it?" Brandon stood up, and suddenly he seemed much larger, looming over her. "Look at yourself. You can barely hold a coffee pot without spilling it. Your hands shake like a drunk's. You're old, you're weak, and you're in the way." Martha took a step backward, her heart hammering in her chest. Around them, the diner had gone quiet. Other customers were watching now, but no one moved to intervene. No one ever did. "Please," Martha said, hating the quaver in her voice, hating that she was giving these people the satisfaction of seeing her upset. "I need you to leave." "We're not leaving until you sign," Victoria snapped. She stood as well, her face twisted with contempt. "Do you have any idea how pathetic you are, shuffling around in that cheap uniform, serving coffee to people who probably pity-tip you? You have no value, no worth. You're just taking up space that could be used for something actually productive." "I said leave." Martha's voice was stronger now, pushed through tears that were building behind her eyes. She turned toward the kitchen, intending to get the manager to call someone to do something other than stand here and absorb this cruelty. But her left knee, the one that had been aching all day, chose that moment to buckle slightly. She stumbled, her hands shooting out to catch herself on the edge of a nearby table. The water glass sitting there tipped over. It happened so fast. The glass hit the floor and shattered, water and ice scattering across the worn linoleum. A few drops splashed onto Victoria's red heels. The woman's face contorted with rage. "Are you kidding me?" she shrieked. "These are Louboutins. Do you have any idea what these cost? $1,200? You're going to pay for these, you clumsy old—" Victoria, Brandon said, but there was no restraint in his voice, only annoyance at the scene his wife was making. Martha knelt down, her joints protesting, trying to gather the broken glass with her bare hands. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll clean this up. Get away from me." Victoria took a step forward, and whether she meant to or not, her foot came down hard on Martha's hand. The pain was immediate and sharp. Martha gasped, pulling her hand back. Blood welled up from where a piece of glass had been driven into her palm. And then Victoria's other hand shot out and shoved Martha's shoulder. Hard. Martha wasn't prepared for it, wasn't braced. At 82, with Parkinson's affecting her balance, she didn't stand a chance. She fell. It felt like slow motion and lightning fast all at once. The floor rushing up to meet her, her head cracking against the hard linoleum. The explosion of stars across her vision, the warm trickle of blood from her temple. Somewhere far away she heard gasps, heard someone say, "Oh my God!" Heard the clatter of something metal hitting the floor, the silver brooch, the one she'd worn every day for 47 years. The one Henry had given her on their wedding day, the one shaped like an angel with spread wings, had come unpinned from her collar. It had fallen near her face, and through the haze of pain, Martha watched Victoria's red heel come down on it. The brooch bent, cracked. One wing snapped clean off. Martha reached for it with her bleeding hand, a small sound of distress escaping her throat. "Don't touch me with your filthy hands!" Victoria hissed and kicked the broken pieces away. Brandon stood over her, his expensive shoes inches from her face. "This is what happens when people don't listen, when they don't know their place. You're nothing, old woman. You're a relic who should have had the grace to fade away years ago." Martha lay there, broken and bleeding, and for the first time in her 82 years, she felt the thing she'd been fighting against her entire life, the terrible, suffocating weight of hopelessness. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was just in the way. Maybe holding onto that house, onto the memories, onto the life she'd built was just selfishness, disguised as sentiment. Maybe she should have given up a long time ago. The diner door opened. The sound of it was sharp in the sudden silence, the little bell above the frame chiming once bright and clear. Heavy footsteps, boots on linoleum, coming closer. Martha couldn't lift her head to see, but she heard someone drop to their knees beside her, felt gentle hands touch her face, turning it carefully toward the light. "Mama!" The voice was rough with emotion, barely controlled rage vibrating under every syllable. Martha's eyes focused slowly. Jack, her son, her beautiful, damaged boy who carried so much pain he could barely breathe sometimes. He was here. "Jackie," she whispered. "I'm here, Mama. I've got you." His hands were shaking as he carefully gathered her into his arms, his touch so gentle it broke her heart. "I've got you." He pulled the red bandana from his pocket, the one he always carried, the one that had been his father's, and pressed it carefully to the bleeding wound on her temple. Then he looked up. Martha couldn't see his face from this angle, but she heard the change in the air, felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. This was the man who'd earned the nickname Reaper in a desert halfway around the world. This was the man who'd seen combat and come home with scars on his body and darkness in his soul. This was her son, and someone had hurt his mother. Jack's voice when he spoke was quiet, almost conversational. But there was something underneath it that made Martha's blood run cold, a promise of violence barely leashed hanging in the air like a blade. "Which one of you put your hands on her?" Brandon and Victoria had backed up several steps, their earlier bravado evaporating in the face of this man who'd appeared like an avenging angel or a devil, depending on your perspective. "Listen," Brandon started, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. "This is a misunderstanding. Your mother fell. We were just—" "Which one of you?" Jack's eyes moved from Brandon to Victoria and back again. "Put your hands on my mother." Victoria's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "She attacked me first. She ruined my shoes, and—" Jack stood up slowly, and the movement was more threatening than any aggressive gesture could have been. At 6'2", with shoulders built from years of manual labor, and a presence that filled the entire room, he was suddenly the only thing anyone could see. You pushed an 82-year-old woman, Jack said. Each word was precise, controlled. You stood over her while she bled on the floor. You broke something that mattered to her. He took one step forward, just one. Brandon put up his hands. Now wait just a minute. You need to calm down. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene, Jack's laugh was sharp and humorless. You assaulted my mother. You came into her workplace, you harassed her, you put your hands on her, and you think I'm the one making a scene. Victoria grabbed Brandon's arm. Call the police. He's threatening us. Good idea, Jack said. Call them. I'm sure they'd be very interested in hearing about how you assaulted an elderly woman. I'm sure the security cameras, he gestured to the corner of the diner where a camera was mounted, will back up your version of events perfectly. Brandon's eyes darted to the camera. His face paled. You know what I think? Jack continued, his voice dropping lower. I think you're bullies. I think you're used to pushing people around, used to getting your way, because you have money and power and you've never had to face real consequences for anything in your miserable lives. He took another step forward. Brandon and Victoria took 2 steps back. But here's the thing about bullies, Jack said. They only pick on people they think can't fight back. They go after the elderly, the vulnerable, the ones who are just trying to live their lives in peace. They feel powerful when they make someone cry, when they make someone feel small. His eyes locked onto Brandon's. The younger man couldn't hold the gaze. He looked away. I want you to listen very carefully, Jack said, because I'm only going to say this once. You're going to apologize to my mother. A real apology. And then you're going to leave this diner and you're going to stay far away from her. You're going to drop whatever scheme you have involving her property. You're going to forget you ever heard the name Martha McAllister. Or what? Victoria said, trying to inject some venom back into her voice. But it came out shaky. Jack smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Or I will make it my life's mission to destroy everything you care about. Your business, your reputation, your comfortable little life built on stepping on people who can't fight back. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps learning very specific skills, and I've spent the last 28 years fixing motorcycles and staying out of trouble. But for you, I'll make an exception. The silence that followed was absolute. No one in the diner moved. No one breathed. Brandon opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I think, he started. I don't care what you think, Jack cut him off. Apologize to my mother. Now. For a long moment, Brandon just stood there, his face red, his jaw working. Victoria clutched his arm, her earlier rage replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. Finally, Brandon spoke, but the words that came out weren't an apology. You don't know who you're messing with, he said. His voice was low, shaking with suppressed fury. I'm Brandon Wallace Ashford III. My family owns half of Scottsdale. I have lawyers on retainer who eat people like you for breakfast. You think you can threaten me? He pulled out his phone. I'm calling Sheriff Morrison right now. We play golf together. We'll see how tough you are when you're in handcuffs. Jack didn't move, didn't blink. Just watched Brandon dial the number with shaking fingers. Behind him, Martha had managed to push herself into a sitting position, still clutching Jack's bandana to her bleeding temple. Jackie, please, she whispered. Don't make trouble. I'm okay. You're not okay, Mama, Jack said quietly, not taking his eyes off Brandon. And that's the problem. Brandon had the phone to his ear now. Yes, Sheriff Morrison. This is Brandon Ashford. I need a deputy at Betty's Diner on Route 66. There's a man here threatening me and my wife. Yes, we're in immediate danger. He hung up with a satisfied smirk. 5 minutes. And then we'll see who apologizes to who. Victoria had regained some of her composure. She pulled out her own phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm posting this on Instagram, she announced. My 287,000 followers are about to hear all about the psychotic biker who attacked us in a diner. Your little garage business, done. Your reputation, destroyed. By tomorrow morning, you'll be unemployable. Jack finally looked away from them, turning back to his mother. He helped her to her feet, one arm supporting her weight, his other hand still holding the bandana to her wound. Can you walk? He asked softly. Martha nodded. I'm okay, baby. I'm okay. But she wasn't. Her hands were shaking worse than ever. Blood was seeping through the bandana. And when Jack looked into her eyes, he saw something that made his chest constrict. Defeat. His mother, who'd never given up on anything in her entire life, looked defeated. Sit here, he said, guiding her to the nearest booth. I'm not going anywhere. He knelt down beside the broken glass and scattered ice, and there among the debris he found what he was looking for, the silver brooch. Henry's wedding gift to Martha 47 years ago. The angel with spread wings. One wing was completely broken off. The other was bent at an unnatural angle. The angel's serene face was scratched, the silver tarnished where Victoria's heel had grounded into the floor. Jack picked up both pieces and held them in his palm. Such a small thing, a piece of metal worth maybe $20 at a pawn shop. But to his mother it was priceless, a connection to his father, a reminder of love that had endured through decades in distance and death. And these people had destroyed it like it was garbage. Jack stood up, the broken brooch clenched in his fist. When he looked at Brandon and Victoria now, something had shifted in his expression. The barely controlled rage had crystallized into something colder, harder, more dangerous. "You made a mistake today," he said quietly. "A big one." Brandon laughed, but it sounded forced. "Are you still talking? The sheriff will be here any minute." "Good," Jack replied. "I look forward to explaining to him exactly what happened here. I look forward to showing him the security footage of you assaulting an 82-year-old woman. I look forward to watching you try to explain why you thought that was acceptable behavior." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Brandon's face. Victoria gripped his arm tighter. "We didn't assault anyone," she said shrilly. "She fell. It was an accident." "Accident?" Jack repeated the word like it tasted bad. "Is that what you're going with?" He turned to face the other customers in the diner. An elderly couple in one booth, a truck driver at the counter, a young waitress frozen in place by the kitchen door. "Did anyone here see what happened?" Jack asked. Silence. Jack's jaw tightened. He understood. These people were scared. Scared of making a scene, scared of getting involved, scared of the kind of people who drove expensive cars and made threats. It was easier to look away. Safer. Then the truck driver stood up. He was a big man, maybe 60, with weathered skin and calloused hands. The kind of man who'd spent his life hauling loads across endless highways invisible to most of the world. "I saw it," he said. His voice was quiet but steady. "The lady didn't fall. That woman in the red shoes pushed her. Hard. I saw the whole thing." The elderly woman in the booth raised her hand tentatively, like a student in class. "I saw it too. It was deliberate. Mean." The young waitress by the kitchen stepped forward. "I can pull the security footage right now if you want. Betty, the owner, she keeps everything backed up to the cloud. Nothing gets deleted." Brandon's face had gone from red to pale. Victoria looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Now," Jack said, his voice still quiet, still controlled, "let's talk about what happens next. You have two choices. You can wait for the sheriff, and we can all watch the security footage together, and you can try to explain to him why you assaulted my mother. Or, Brandon asked hoarsely, or you can leave. Right now, you can drop whatever scheme you're running on my mother's property. You can forget you ever met her, and you can pray I never see your faces again." "This is extortion," Victoria hissed. "No," Jack corrected. "Extortion is what you were doing when you tried to intimidate an old woman into selling her house for a fraction of its value. This is called consequences. You're just not used to them." In the distance, a siren wailed, getting closer. Brandon grabbed Victoria's arm. "We're leaving." "But the sheriff is not going to help us when there's video evidence of you pushing an old lady," Brandon snapped. "Move." They headed for the door, Victoria's heels clicking frantically on the floor. But at the threshold, Brandon stopped. He turned back, and the look he gave Jack was pure venom. "This isn't over," he said. "You think you won something here? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know where your mother lives. I know where you work. I will make your lives hell." Jack took 3 steps forward, closing the distance so fast Brandon actually flinched. "You want to threaten me?" Jack said softly. "Go ahead, but you threatened my mother. You hurt my mother, and that means you and I were going to see each other again. Count on it." Brandon held his gaze for 2 seconds. 3. Then he turned and fled, Victoria scrambling after him in her $1,200 heels. The Mercedes peeled out of the parking lot, gravel spraying just as a sheriff's deputy pulled in from the other direction. Jack watched them go, his hands still clenched into fists, the broken angel brooch cutting into his palm. "Sir," he turned. The deputy who'd entered the diner was young, maybe late 20s, with the cautious expression of someone who'd walked into a situation he didn't fully understand yet. "I'm Deputy Thomas Granger," the young man said. "We got a call about a disturbance." "No disturbance," the truck driver called from his seat at the counter. "Just some rich folks who didn't like being told no." Deputy Granger looked around the diner, taking in the broken glass, the blood on the floor, Martha sitting in the booth with a bandana pressed to her head. "Ma'am, are you injured?" he asked, approaching Martha carefully. "I'm fine," Martha said automatically. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," Jack said. He turned to face the deputy, and some of the rage in his expression had faded, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. "Two people came in here and assaulted my mother. There's security footage. There are witnesses. I want to press charges." Deputy Granger pulled out a notebook. "Can you walk me through what happened?" For the next 20 minutes, statements were taken. The waitress pulled up the security footage on the diner's computer. The deputy watched it 3 times, his expression growing grimmer with each viewing. "This is pretty clear-cut assault," he said finally. "Do you know who these people are?" "Brandon Ashford," Jack said. "At least that's what he said. Lives in Scottsdale, apparently. Thinks being rich means he can do whatever he wants." Granger nodded slowly. "Ashford? Yeah, I know the name. Big developer. Has some connections." He looked at Jack directly. "This might not be as straightforward as you'd hope. People with money, they have lawyers. They know how to make things complicated." "Are you saying he'll get away with it?" "I'm saying it's going to be a fight." Granger closed his notebook. "But if you want to pursue this, I'll support you. What I saw in that video, that's assault. Age of the victim makes it aggravated. If the DA wants to pursue it, Mr. Ashford could be looking at serious charges." "Good," Jack said. After the deputy left with copies of the security footage and contact information for all the witnesses, Jack finally allowed himself to breathe. The other customers had drifted out, leaving quiet tips and sympathetic looks. The young waitress was sweeping up the broken glass. The cook had emerged from the kitchen to make sure Martha was okay, and Martha sat in the booth looking smaller somehow, older. Jack slid into the seat across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You were supposed to be here at 6:30, Martha finally said. "Like always. I was early. Lucky for me." Jack reached across the table and took his mother's hand. The one that wasn't bleeding. The one that trembled constantly now, betraying the disease eating away at her nervous system. "Mama," he said quietly, "what did they want with your house?" Martha's eyes filled with tears. "They're building something in Flagstaff, a development. They need all the properties on the street. Everyone else is sold. I'm the only one left. And you said no." "Of course I said no. That's Henry's house. That's where we raised you. That's where—" Her voice broke. "That's all I have left of him, Jackie. I can't sell it." Jack nodded slowly. "Then you won't. I'll make sure of it. You heard that man. He has money, power. He said he'd make our lives hell. Let him try." Martha squeezed her son's hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite the tremors. "When did my little boy get so tough?" "I learned from the toughest person I know," Jack said. "A woman who raised a son on her own, who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, who never once complained, never once gave up, even when it would have been easier." Tears spilled down Martha's cheeks. "I'm not tough anymore. I'm just tired. Being tired doesn't mean you're not tough. It means you've been fighting for a long time." Jack reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small wrapped box. "I was going to give you this when I came in." Before all this happened, Martha took the box with shaking hands, slowly unwrapping the brown paper. When she opened it and saw the silver angel brooch inside, new perfect, its wings spread wide, her breath caught. "Jackie?" "The other one's broken," Jack said, setting the 2 damaged pieces on the table between them. "But this one's whole. Dad gave you an angel 47 years ago. I thought you deserved another one." Martha lifted the new brooch from the box, holding it up to catch the light. Then she looked at the broken pieces of the original. "Can we fix it?" she asked. "The old one?" "I don't know, Mama. It's pretty damaged. But we could try. You're good with your hands. You fix things." Jack picked up the 2 pieces, examining them. One wing completely snapped off, the body bent. "But maybe with the right tools, the right patience." "Yeah," he said. "We could try." Martha smiled through her tears. "Good. Because that one has history. It was with me through the good times and the bad. It was there when your father died. It was there when you came home from the war. It's been broken before and put back together. Just like us." She pinned the new brooch to her collar right where the old one had been. Then she carefully gathered the broken pieces of the original and placed them back in the small box. "We'll fix it together," she said. "And when we do, I'll wear them both, the old and the new, the broken and the whole. Because that's what life is, isn't it? All of it together." Jack felt something crack open in his chest. Some wall he'd built after Sarah died, some barrier he'd erected to keep the pain manageable. His mother's words had found a weakness in it, and now the emotions he'd been holding back for 5 years came flooding through. He wasn't just angry about what had happened today. He was angry about everything, about losing Sarah, about losing time with Grace, about watching his mother grow old and sick and struggling while he'd been lost in his own grief. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I'm sorry I haven't been there. I'm sorry I disappeared after Sarah died. I'm sorry you've been dealing with the Parkinsons alone. I'm sorry." "Stop," Martha said gently. "Jack Henry McAllister, you look at me." He met her eyes. "Grief doesn't have a timeline," she said. "You lost your wife, the love of your life. You're allowed to hurt. You're allowed to be broken. But baby, you can't stay broken forever. Sarah wouldn't want that." "I know." "Do you? Because for 18 months you've been punishing yourself, pushing away everyone who loves you. Grace calls me, every week. Asks if I've heard from you. Asks if you're okay. And I lie to her because I don't want her to worry, but Jackie, she's worried anyway. She misses her daddy." The words hit like punches. Jack closed his eyes. "I don't know how to be around her," he admitted. "Every time I see Grace, I see Sarah. Same eyes, same smile, and it hurts so much I can't breathe." "Then you learn to breathe through the pain," Martha said. "You do it scared, you do it hurting, but you do it because that girl needs you. And whether you realize it or not, you need her too." She reached across the table and cupped his face with both hands the way she used to when he was small. "Life breaks all of us, baby. Every single one. The question isn't whether you'll break, it's what you do after. Do you stay in pieces or do you pick them up and try to put yourself back together, even if you know you'll never be quite the same?" Jack covered her hands with his own. "How do you do it? How are you still so strong?" "I'm not strong, I'm just stubborn. There's a difference." She smiled. "And I have people worth being stubborn for. I have you, I have Grace, I have a grandbaby on the way who's going to need a grandfather." Jack's eyes snapped open. "What?" "Oh," Martha's smile widened. "Grace was going to tell you herself. She's 16 weeks along, due in May." The world tilted. Jack sat back in the booth, his mind reeling. "I'm going to be a grandfather." "You're going to be a grandfather," Martha confirmed, "which means you need to pull yourself together, Jackie. That baby needs you. Grace needs you. And whether those Ashford people know it or not, they just picked a fight with a man who now has something to protect." She was right. God, she was right. For 18 months, Jack had been drifting, existing but not living. Going through the motions but not really there. He'd lost Sarah, and in his grief, he'd lost himself too. But now his mother had been attacked. His daughter was pregnant. His family was in danger, and for the first time since Sarah's death, Jack felt the fog lift. Felt purpose crystallize in his chest like ice. He'd spent 6 years in the Marines protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. He'd spent the last 28 years hiding from his own pain. But maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to remember who he was. Jack Reaper McAllister, the man who didn't quit, the man who didn't run, the man who protected what was his. "You're right," he said to his mother. "I've been broken long enough. Time to put the pieces back together." Martha smiled. "That's my boy." Outside, the last of the daylight faded into full dark. The diner's neon sign flickered to life, casting pink and blue light across the parking lot. In the distance, thunder rumbled. A storm was coming. But Jack wasn't afraid of storms. He'd weathered worse, and he was done running from them. He stood up, helping his mother to her feet. "Come on, let's get you to a doctor. That cut needs proper care." "It's fine, Mama," he gave her a look. "No more downplaying, no more pretending everything's okay when it's not. We're family. We take care of each other. Deal." Martha's eyes glistened with fresh tears, but she nodded. "Deal." As they walked toward the door, Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, a text from an unknown number. "You made a big mistake today, Reaper. People who cross Brandon Ashford tend to regret it. Consider this your only warning." Jack deleted the message without responding. Let them come. Let Brandon Ashford and his cruel wife bring whatever they wanted. Jack had spent too long running from fights, running from pain, running from life. He was done running. The storm was coming, and Jack McAllister was ready. The emergency room at Flagstaff Medical Center smelled like antiseptic and fear. Jack sat in a plastic chair that was bolted to the floor, watching a nurse clean the wound on his mother's temple under harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. Martha winced but didn't complain. She never complained. That was part of the problem. "You're lucky," the nurse said, applying butterfly bandages to close the cut. "Head wounds bleed a lot, but this one's superficial. No concussion that I can see, but we'll want to monitor you for the next 24 hours, just to be safe." "I'm fine to go home," Martha said. "Mama," Jack's voice was firm, "you're staying at my place tonight. No arguments." Martha opened her mouth to protest, then saw the look on her son's face and closed it again. Some battles weren't worth fighting. The nurse finished bandaging and stepped back. "All done. You'll have a bruise for a week or so, but it should heal clean. Ice it when you get home. Take ibuprofen for the pain. If you experience dizziness, nausea, or vision problems, come back immediately." After the nurse left, Jack helped his mother off the examination table. She moved slowly, favoring her left side where she'd hit the floor. Every movement reminded him of what had happened. Every wince made the anger in his chest burn hotter. "Jackie," Martha said softly, "don't. Don't what? Don't do that thing you're doing, where you plan out exactly how you're going to make them pay. I can see it in your face. You get that look, the same one you had when Tommy Bridges pushed you off the monkey bars in 3rd grade, and you spent 2 weeks planning your revenge." Despite everything, Jack almost smiled. "I got him back, didn't I? You put a frog in his lunchbox. He screamed so loud the principal came running." Martha touched his arm. "But baby, these aren't 3rd graders. These are people with money and power, people who play by different rules. Then I'll learn their rules and beat them at their own game. Or you could just let it go. We'll keep the house. They can't force me to sell." Jack looked at his mother, really looked at her. The white hair that had once been dark brown like his own. The hands that trembled, even at rest. The tired lines around her eyes that had deepened over the years he'd been too lost in his own grief to notice. "They put their hands on you," he said quietly. "They made you bleed. They broke something you loved. And they did it because they thought you were weak, thought you were alone, thought no one would stand up for you." He took both her hands in his, steadying the tremors. "But you're not alone, Mama. You've never been alone. And I'm done being the ghost who shows up once a month and pretends everything's fine. I'm done hiding from my own life. Those people want to fight. They'll get one." Martha searched his face for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "But we do this smart, not angry. Your father used to say that anger makes you stupid and stupid gets you killed. Dad was a wise man. He was. And he'd be proud of you right now. Scared for you, maybe, but proud." They left the hospital as the clock struck 10. The November night had turned cold frost already forming on car windshields in the parking lot. Jack's Harley sat under a streetlight, chrome gleaming. "I should have driven the truck," he muttered, eyeing the motorcycle. "Can't exactly put you on the back of that." "I'll be fine," Martha said. But when she tried to climb on behind him, her left knee buckled slightly, and Jack had to catch her. His jaw tightened. The Parkinson's was getting worse. How long had she been hiding it? How many times had she struggled alone because she didn't want to burden him? "Change of plans," he said. "We're getting you a ride." He pulled out his phone and called the one person he'd been avoiding for 4 months. Grace answered on the second ring. "Dad?" Hearing her voice, really hearing it, not just letting it go to voicemail, made Jack's throat constrict. "Hey, baby girl," he said. "I need a favor." 45 minutes later, a silver Honda Accord pulled into the hospital parking lot. Grace Evelyn McAllister stepped out, and Jack felt his heart skip the way it always did when he saw her. She looked so much like Sarah. Same dark eyes, same determined chin, same way of holding herself like she was ready to fight the world if it crossed her. But when she looked at him, there was hurt in those eyes. Hurt he'd put there by disappearing for 18 months. "Grandma," Grace said, rushing to Martha and hugging her carefully. "Are you okay? Dad said you were attacked." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little mishap. A little mishap that required an ER visit." Grace pulled back, examining the bandage on Martha's temple. Her doctor's eyes cataloged every injury with professional efficiency. "Who did this?" "Some people who don't understand the word no," Jack said. Grace turned to him. They hadn't been this close in months. He could see the questions in her eyes, the anger, the confusion, the desperate hope that maybe finally her father was coming back to her. "Take your grandmother to my place," Jack said, handing her his house keys. "Make sure she rests. I have some things I need to take care of." "What things?" "Research." Grace's eyes narrowed. Dad, whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything violent if that's what you're worried about, but I need to know who we're dealing with. These people threatened Mama. They're not going to stop just because we ask nicely. Then we call the police. We file charges. We do this legally. We already did. Deputy took statements, watched the security footage. But you know how these things work, Grace. Rich people have lawyers. They delay, they negotiate, they make problems disappear. And in the meantime, they keep harassing your grandmother. Martha touched Grace's arm. Let him do what he needs to do, sweetheart. Your father's good at finding things out. Always has been. Grace looked between them, clearly unhappy. But finally she nodded. Fine, but you call me if anything happens. And I mean anything, Dad. No more disappearing for months at a time. I promise, Jack said. And he meant it. He watched them drive away his daughter, taking care of his mother, 3 generations held together by love and stubbornness. Then he climbed onto his Harley and headed into the night. The road stretched out before him, empty and dark except for the cone of his headlight cutting through the blackness. Jack let the bike eat up the miles while his mind worked through the problem. Brandon Wallace Ashford III, developer, rich, connected, the kind of man who thought money could buy anything, including the right to hurt people who got in his way. But every man had weaknesses. Every fortress had a crack. Jack just had to find it. He rode for 2 hours, letting the cold air clear his head, letting the rhythm of the road center him. This was what he'd always done when he needed to think, climbed on his bike, and rode until the answers came. By the time he pulled into a 24-hour truck stop near the New Mexico border, he knew what he had to do. The truck stop diner was half empty, just a few long-haul drivers grabbing coffee and pie before hitting the road again. Jack took a booth in the corner and ordered black coffee he didn't drink. Then he pulled out his phone and started searching. Brandon Wallace Ashford III had a substantial digital footprint. Social media accounts showcasing his luxury lifestyle, business profiles on LinkedIn and corporate websites, news articles about his development projects, society page photos of him and Victoria at charity galas, both smiling like they'd never done anything wrong in their lives. Jack read it all. Every article, every interview, every press release. Ashford Development Corporation, founded by Brandon's grandfather in 1952, built into a regional powerhouse by Brandon's father, Wallace Ashford II, and then inherited by Brandon, who, according to several business journals, had struggled to maintain his father's legacy. That was interesting. Polite corporate speak for, he's running it into the ground. Jack dug deeper. 3 failed projects in the last 5 years. Cost overruns, missed deadlines, investor lawsuits quietly settled out of court. The Flagstaff development wasn't just another project, it was Brandon's last chance to prove he could do what his father and grandfather had done, and Martha's house was the only thing standing in his way. Jack set down his phone and stared at the cold coffee in his cup. A desperate man was a dangerous man. Brandon wasn't evil in the cartoonish sense, he was worse. He was a failure trying to prove himself, and people like that would do anything to avoid admitting they weren't good enough. That made him unpredictable, reckless. Jack needed more information. He needed to understand the full scope of what he was dealing with. He scrolled through his contacts and found a name he hadn't called in 6 years, Delilah Mae Thornton. She'd been the accountant at Ashford Development for 20 years before retiring. Jack had met her when he'd fixed her vintage Triumph motorcycle, and they'd stayed in touch. It was almost midnight, but Delilah answered on the 3rd ring. Jack McAllister, she said, her voice warm despite the late hour. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me. Never, Miss Thornton. I need to ask you something about your old employer. There was a pause. When Delilah spoke again, her voice was cautious. Brandon Ashford. Yeah, what can you tell me about him? Why do you want to know, Jack told her. About the diner, about Martha, about the house in Flagstaff. With each detail, Delilah's silence grew heavier. That boy, she finally said, and there was genuine sadness in her voice. That boy used to be different, you know. When his daddy was alive, Brandon actually tried. He wasn't brilliant, but he worked hard, wanted to prove himself. What changed? Wallace died, left everything to Brandon, the company, the properties, the reputation, and Brandon just couldn't handle it. He made bad decisions, trusted the wrong people, started gambling to deal with the stress. By the time I retired 2 years ago, the company was hemorrhaging money. How much money? Millions. Brandon took out loans to cover the losses, private loans from people you don't want to owe money to. Jack's hand tightened on his phone. What kind of people? The kind who don't go through the courts when you can't pay, The kind who make examples. Delilah sighed. Jack, if Brandon's going after your mama's house, it's because he's desperate. The Flagstaff project is his last shot at salvaging things. If it fails, he's done. And people who are done do very stupid, very dangerous things. How long does he have? Last I heard, maybe a week, maybe less. Jack thanked Delilah and hung up. His mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. Brandon wasn't just being cruel for the sake of cruelty. He was drowning and he'd grabbed onto Martha like she was a life raft. If she wouldn't let go willingly, he'd pull her under with him. That changed things. It meant Brandon wouldn't stop. It meant he'd escalate. It meant Jack needed allies. He pulled up another contact. This one he hadn't called in over a year. Sheriff Morrison answered with a grunt. This better be important. It's Jack McAllister. A pause. Reaper. Been a long time. Too long. Jack took a breath. I need to call in a favor. Thomas Morrison had served with Jack in Desert Storm. They'd been pinned down together during a firefight outside Kuwait City, and Jack had pulled Morrison out of a burning Humvee while machine gun fire tore up the sand around them. Morrison had lost 2 fingers and gained a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, but he'd lived. After they'd both come home, they'd stayed in touch. Morrison had become sheriff of Coconino County. Jack had become a mechanic. They drifted apart over the years, but the bond forged in combat never really faded. What kind of favor? Morrison asked. Jack told him, about Martha, about Brandon, about the assault at the diner. Morrison listened without interrupting. Deputy Granger filed a report, Morrison said when Jack finished. I saw the security footage. It's clear-cut assault. So arrest him. It's not that simple. Brandon Ashford has lawyers on retainer. Good ones. They'll drag this out, get the charges reduced, probably end up with probation and a fine. Meanwhile, he keeps harassing your mother. That's not acceptable. No, it's not, but it's reality. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Look, Jack, I owe you my life. You know that. But I'm also an elected official in a county where the Ashfords have donated a lot of money to a lot of campaigns. I can't just make this disappear for you. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to make sure the law gets applied fairly. Rich or not, he assaulted an elderly woman. That should count for something. It does, and I'll make sure the DA knows this is serious. But be realistic about what the legal system can do here. These things take time. Time my mother doesn't have, Jack said quietly. If Brandon's as desperate as I think he is, he won't wait for the courts. He'll try something else. Then you document everything. Every phone call, every visit, every threat. Build a case for harassment. Get a restraining order. Do this by the book. And if he doesn't care about restraining orders, Morrison's voice hardened, then you call me, immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself, Jack. You're a civilian now, not a Marine. You go vigilante and I can't protect you. Jack understood what Morrison wasn't saying. I'll help where I can, but there are limits. It would have to be enough. After hanging up, Jack sat in the diner booth and let the exhaustion wash over him. It was nearly 2 in the morning. He'd been awake for almost 20 hours, and the day's adrenaline was finally wearing off. But he couldn't go home yet. There was one more thing he needed to do. He paid for the coffee he hadn't drunk and rode his Harley through the darkness toward Oklahoma. The Sunset Valley Nursing Home sat on the outskirts of a town too small to have a name on most maps. It was a low, sprawling building that had been painted a cheerful yellow sometime in the distant past. Now the paint was peeling, revealing gray concrete underneath. Jack parked his bike and checked his watch. 3:47 in the morning. Visiting hours were long over, but he hadn't ridden 340 miles to be turned away. The night nurse at the front desk looked up when he entered. She was young, maybe 25, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Amy. We're closed, she said. Not unkindly, just stating a fact. I need to see one of your residents, Lorraine Pemberton. Amy's expression softened slightly. Are you family? No, but I need to talk to her. It's important. Sir, it's almost 4 in the morning. Mrs. Pemberton is sleeping. And even if she wasn't, I can't just let random people wander the halls. Jack pulled out his wallet and extracted 5 $20 bills. He laid them on the counter. I'm not random. I'm someone trying to help her daughter make things right. And I need to understand some things first. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Amy looked at the money, looked at Jack, looked at the money again. 10 minutes. She said pocketing the bills, or room 147. But if she gets upset, you leave immediately. Understood. Room 147 was at the end of a long hallway that smelled like disinfectant trying to mask something worse. The door was cracked open and Jack could hear the steady beep of a heart monitor inside. He pushed the door open carefully. The room was small and institutional. A single bed, a chair, a TV mounted on the wall that wasn't on. And in the bed, a woman who looked much older than 79. Lorraine Pemberton lay on her back, one side of her face slack from what had probably been a stroke. Her white hair was thin, spread across the pillow like cobwebs. Her hands rested on top of the blanket, gnarled with arthritis. Jack approached quietly and sat in the chair beside the bed. Lorraine's eyes opened. They were cloudy with cataracts, but there was still awareness in them. Who? Her voice was barely a whisper, slurred from the stroke. Who are you? My name is Jack McAllister. I'm sorry to wake you, Mrs. Pemberton. I don't know you. No, ma'am, but I know your daughter, Victoria. The change in Lorraine was immediate. Her eyes widened, her good hand reached out, grasping at the air. Victoria, she's here, my baby's here. The hope in her voice broke something inside Jack. No, ma'am, she's not here, but I need to ask you about her. When's the last time she visited? Lorraine's hand fell back to the bed. The light in her eyes dimmed. I don't remember. Long time. She's busy. She's important. On TV. She showed me pictures once. So beautiful. My beautiful girl. When did she show you pictures? Christmas. We had Christmas together. She brought me, Lorraine's face scrunched with effort, brought me chocolates. The good kind. What year was that, Mrs. Pemberton? This year, this Christmas. It was November. Christmas hadn't happened yet. And from the state of this room, the absence of any personal items, any photos, any evidence that anyone visited regularly, Jack would bet everything he owned that Victoria hadn't been here for Christmas in years. Mrs. Pemberton, he said gently, does Victoria call you? Sometimes she's so busy. She tells me about her life, the parties, the famous people she knows. I'm so proud of her. But the way Lorraine said it, the slight hesitation, the way her eyes didn't quite focus, Jack suspected these phone calls were as fictional as the Christmas visit. Do you miss her? He asked. Lorraine's good eye filled with tears. Every day, she whispered. Every single day. But she's living her life. She's happy. That's what matters. I don't want to be a burden. There it was, the same phrase Martha had used. I don't want to be a burden. Two mothers both terrified of being seen as weak, both willing to suffer alone rather than inconvenience their children. The difference was that Martha's son actually showed up. Jack stayed for the full 10 minutes. He held Lorraine's hand and let her talk about her daughter, the one who existed in her memory, not the cruel woman who'd shoved an old lady and broken her treasured brooch. When he left Amy, the night nurse was waiting in the hallway. You got her talking, Amy said. She usually doesn't talk much anymore, just lies there mostly. How often does Victoria visit? Amy's expression closed off. I can't discuss other visitors. That means never, doesn't it? I really can't. How long has Mrs. Pemberton been here? Amy hesitated. Then perhaps because Jack looked as tired as she felt, she answered. 7 years. Victoria pays the bills on time, minimum coverage, but she's never visited, not once in my 3 years working here. 7 years. Not 6 like Jack had thought. 7 years of Lorraine waiting for a daughter who never came. 7 years of clinging to false memories because the truth was too painful. Does anyone visit her? You're the first person in 6 months. Jack felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. This was what Victoria was running from. Not just aging, not just losing her looks, but this. The end result of a life lived. The knowledge that beauty fades and fame is fleeting, and eventually we all end up alone in rooms that smell like disinfectant, waiting for people who never come. Victoria looked at old people and saw her future, so she punished them for reminding her of what she feared most. Understanding someone's cruelty didn't excuse it, but it gave Jack something he needed: leverage. He left Sunset Valley as dawn broke over the Oklahoma plains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The Harley's engine roared as he opened up the throttle, eating up highway miles. He had a 6-hour ride back to Arizona, 6 hours to plan his next move. Brandon was desperate because of money. Victoria was cruel because of fear. Those were weaknesses Jack could exploit. But first he needed to talk to his daughter. Grace was waiting when Jack pulled into his driveway at noon. She was sitting on his front porch, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, cradling a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping her conscious. Grandma's sleeping, she said as Jack dismounted the bike. Finally, she was up most of the night. The Parkinson's makes it hard for her to get comfortable. I know. Do you? Because you haven't exactly been around to see it. The words were sharp but not cruel, just honest. Jack sat down beside his daughter on the porch steps. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I'm sorry, Jack said finally, for disappearing, for not answering your calls, for being a ghost for the last 18 months. Why did you? Grace's voice was small, younger than her 35 years. I lost Mom too, Dad. I needed you and you just vanished. Because every time I looked at you, I saw her. Your eyes, your smile, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking. And it hurt so much I couldn't breathe. So you avoided me. So I was a coward. I let grief make me selfish. And I'm sorrier than you'll ever know. Grace was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Mom made me promise something before she died. She made me promise I'd take care of you, because she knew you wouldn't take care of yourself. Jack's throat tightened. I tried, Dad, I really tried, but you wouldn't let me in. I know. Are you going to let me in now? Jack turned to look at his daughter. Really look at her. And for the first time in 18 months, he didn't just see Sarah's ghost. He saw Grace. His brilliant, strong, compassionate daughter who'd somehow managed to become an amazing person despite having a father who'd been too broken to show up. Yeah, he said. I'm going to try. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She leaned into him and Jack put his arm around her shoulders, the way he used to when she was little and had nightmares. Grandma told me about the baby, he said quietly. Grace stiffened. She wasn't supposed to tell you yet. I wanted to tell you myself. Are you scared? Terrified? I'm 35, Dad. I'm not married. The father's out of the picture. I'll be doing this alone. No, you won't. You'll have me, and your grandmother, and you're going to be an amazing mother. Grace pulled back, wiping her eyes. How do you know? Because you're already better at this than I ever was. You showed up when I didn't. You kept trying when I pushed you away. That's what good parents do, they show up. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. They sat together as the afternoon sun warmed the desert air. Inside the house, Martha slept peacefully for the first time in days. Outside, a father and daughter began the slow work of rebuilding what grief had broken. Tell me what you found out, Grace said eventually. About the Ashfords. Jack told her everything. About Brandon's desperation, about the loans, about Victoria's abandoned mother. Grace listened with her doctor's focus, processing information and filing it away. So they're both running from something, she said when he finished. Brandon from failure, Victoria from aging. Yeah. And your plan is what exactly out to psychoanalyze them into leaving Grandma alone. My plan is to give them a way out, one that doesn't involve destroying my mother. That's very evolved of you, Dad. Very unreaper-like. Jack smiled slightly. Your mother taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is show mercy, even to people who don't deserve it. Mom was smart. She was. And she'd want me to do this right, not with my fist, but with my head. Grace stood up, stretching. Okay, so what's the first step? We need money. A lot of it. Enough to buy Martha's house at fair market value and fund the Flagstaff development so Brandon can pay back his loans. How much is a lot? $500,000, give or take. Grace laughed, but it was bitter. Well, I have about $40,000 in savings, so we're only $460,000 short. Got any other brilliant ideas? Jack looked at his daughter, at the woman Sarah had raised to be strong and independent and good. Actually, he said slowly, I might. The community meeting at Betty's Diner 2 days later drew a bigger crowd than Jack had expected. 47 people crammed into a space designed for maybe 30. Veterans, retirees, local business owners, people who'd lived in the area their whole lives. Martha sat at the center table, her hands folded, the new angel brooch pinned to her collar. Grace stood beside Jack at the front of the room. Thank you all for coming, Jack began. His voice was steady, but his heart hammered in his chest. Public speaking had never been his strength. Most of you know my mother, Martha McAllister. She's worked at this diner for 13 years. Before that, she raised me alone after my dad died. She's lived in Flagstaff for 46 years. That town is her home. He paused, looking around the room at the faces watching him. Some he knew, some were strangers. But they'd all shown up because someone had asked them to care about an old woman they barely knew. A few days ago, 2 people assaulted my mother right here in this diner. They did it because she refused to sell her house. They did it because they thought she was weak and alone and wouldn't fight back. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. They were wrong. My mother is one of the strongest people I know, and she's not alone. Jack outlined the situation, the Flagstaff development, Brandon's desperation. The choice before them: let Martha be pushed out of her home or find another way. Here's what I'm proposing, he said. We buy my mother's house, as a community. Fair market value $520,000. Martha gets to live there for free for the rest of her life with legal protections that can't be challenged. And we use the rest of the property to build something that helps everyone. What kind of something? Asked Joe Brennan, the regular, who always ordered meatloaf. A care facility for people with Parkinson's, for veterans who need support, for anyone in our community who needs a place to be cared for with dignity. We partner with Brandon Ashford's company to build it. He gets his development. We get a resource that helps people. And where exactly do we get $500,000? Someone called from the back. Grace stepped forward. I'm contributing my life savings. $40,000. It's not much, but it's a start. The room went silent. Honey, no, Martha said, tears in her eyes. That's your future. Grandma, my future is making sure you're safe, making sure this community has what it needs. I'm a doctor. I'll make more money. But you only have one home. Jack watched his daughter stand tall and strong, offering everything she had, and felt pride swell in his chest. I'm in for $5,000, said a voice Jack didn't recognize. A man in his 70s stood up. My wife had Parkinson's. She died in a facility 3 counties over because there was nothing local. If we can build something here, it's worth it. 2,000, said another. 500. 1,000. One by one, people stood up. Veterans who'd served with Jack's father. Business owners who remembered when Martha had helped them through hard times. Strangers who simply believed that community meant taking care of each other. By the end of the meeting, they'd pledged $312,000. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Jack stood before the crowd, his throat tight with emotion. These people didn't owe him anything, didn't owe Martha anything, but they were showing up anyway because that's what decent people did. Thank you, he said, his voice cracked slightly. Thank you all. As people filed out, leaving contact information and pledge amounts, Martha came to stand beside her son. You did a good thing here, Jackie. We're still short $200,000. We'll find it. We always do. Jack wasn't so sure, but he nodded anyway. Outside, the sun was setting again. Another day gone. Another day closer to whatever Brandon Ashford would do next. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Cute community meeting. Won't change anything. You have 48 hours to convince your mother to sign. After that, things get ugly. B.A. Jack showed the message to Grace. Dad, she said quietly. What are you going to do? Jack looked at the broken angel brooch he'd been carrying in his pocket, the one he'd promised to fix. He turned it over in his palm, feeling the sharp edges where Victoria's heel had snapped off the wing. Broken, but not destroyed. That was the key. The Ashfords had tried to break his mother, but they'd failed. Now Jack had to make sure they didn't get a second chance. I'm going to talk to Brandon, he said, face to face, man to man, and I'm going to offer him something he needs more than my mother's house. What's that? Jack looked at his daughter, at his mother, at the community that had rallied around a stranger because it was the right thing to do. Hope, he said. I'm going to offer him hope. The Ashford Development Corporation occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in Scottsdale that reflected the Arizona sun like a mirror. Jack stood in the parking garage staring up at the building, his Harley ticking softly as the engine cooled. He'd ridden straight through from Flagstaff, 3 hours of highway and desert, thinking about what he was going to say. How do you offer hope to a man who'd hurt your mother? How do you extend mercy to someone who'd shown none Sarah would have known? She'd always been better at finding the good in people, even when Jack couldn't see it. The elevator to the executive floor required a key card. Jack didn't have one, but he did have 6 years of Marine training that included creative problem solving, so he waited in the lobby until a distracted executive walked past, then slipped through the security door before it closed. Sometimes the old skills came in handy. Brandon's office was at the end of a hallway lined with photos of buildings the Ashford family had developed over 70 years. Shopping centers, office complexes, luxury condominiums. A legacy built by 2 generations of ruthless, brilliant men, and now inherited by someone desperately trying not to be the one who destroyed it all. Jack didn't knock. He opened the door and walked in like he belonged there. Brandon was on the phone, his back to the door, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Scottsdale skyline. His office was enormous, decorated in that aggressive minimalism that screamed expensive. Chrome and glass and sharp angles. Brandon spun around at the sound of the door, his face going from surprise to anger in half a second. I'll call you back, he said into the phone, then hung up. How the hell did you get up here? We need to talk, Jack said. We have nothing to talk about. Get out before I call security. Go ahead, call them. But they'll find this situation awkward when I explain to them that their boss is being investigated for assaulting an elderly woman. I'm sure it won't affect business at all. Brandon's jaw tightened. His hand hovered over the phone, but he didn't pick it up. Jack closed the door behind him and took 3 steps into the office. Not threatening, just present. You sent me a text, Jack said. 48 hours. Things get ugly. I'm here to offer you an alternative. I don't need alternatives. I need your mother's property. No, what you need is money to pay back the people you borrowed from. What you need is a way to save this company and prove to your dead father that you weren't the failure you're terrified you are. Brandon's face flushed red. You don't know anything about me. I know you inherited something you weren't ready for. I know you made mistakes trying to prove yourself. I know you're drowning in debt to people who don't forgive and don't forget. And I know the Flagstaff development is your last chance to fix everything before it all comes crashing down. Brandon stared at him, and Jack saw the exact moment the bluster collapsed. The younger man's shoulders sagged. He turned back to the window. How did you find out? I asked the right questions to the right people. Delilah Thornton says hello, by the way. Delilah, Brandon laughed bitterly. She warned me, you know, when Dad died and I took over. She said I should slow down, be patient, learn the business before trying to expand. I didn't listen. He sat down in his desk chair, suddenly looking much older than 47. You're right, he said quietly, about all of it. I owe $2.3 million to a group out of Las Vegas. They gave me 72 hours. That was 4 days ago. They're being generous because my father once did them a favor, but their patience has limits. What happens when their patience runs out? Brandon met Jack's eyes. People like that didn't just take your money, they take everything. They'll destroy my company, come after my assets. And if I still can't pay, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Jack pulled out a chair and sat down across from Brandon. Between them, the massive desk felt like a chasm. I'm going to tell you something, Jack said, and I need you to really hear it. What you did to my mother was wrong, unforgivable by most standards. You hurt an 82-year-old woman because you were desperate. You bullied her because she was an easy target. That makes you a coward. Brandon flinched but didn't argue. But, Jack continued, I also know what desperation does to people. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning, and you'll grab onto anything to stay afloat, even if it means pulling someone else under. So I'm going to give you something you don't deserve. What's that? A second chance. Brandon's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why would you do that? Because my wife spent the last year of her life teaching me that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Because my mother taught me that everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst moment. And because, despite everything, I don't think you're evil. I think you're scared and stupid, and you made terrible choices. But scared and stupid can be fixed. Jack leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. My community has raised $312,000 to buy my mother's house at fair market value. We need another $200,000 to make it work. You're going to contribute that money. Brandon laughed. I just told you I'm broke. Where am I supposed to get $200,000? Sell something. Liquidate assets. I don't care. But you find it. And in return, we give you the Flagstaff development. Not by forcing my mother out, but by making her a partner. We use the property to build a care facility for people with Parkinson's and a veterans center. You oversee the construction at cost no profit margin for Ashford Development on this one. But it gets built, it gets finished, and it proves to your investors that you can still deliver. At cost. That's insane. I'd be working for free. You'd be working for redemption, Jack corrected, and for the opportunity to not have your legs broken by the people you owe money to. Because here's the thing, Brandon. My community doesn't have to do any of this. We could just hold firm, refuse to sell, and watch your whole empire crumble. But we're offering you a lifeline. The question is whether you're smart enough to grab it. Brandon stood up and paced to the window. For a long moment, he just stared out at the city his family had helped build. Why do you care if I survive this? He asked finally. After what I did to your mother, you should want me destroyed. Maybe I should, Jack agreed. But my daughter is pregnant. In 6 months, I'm going to be a grandfather. And I want my grandchild to grow up in a world where people choose mercy over revenge, where broken things get fixed instead of thrown away. You hurt my mother, but you're also someone's son. You probably have people who love you despite your mistakes. Don't they deserve a chance to see you become better? Brandon's reflection in the window showed a man wrestling with something. Pride, maybe, or shame, or the simple difficulty of accepting help from someone he'd wronged. I don't know if I can do it, he said quietly. Build something at cost. Manage a project that big with no profit. I've never done anything like that. Then you'll learn, and you'll have help. My community will work alongside you. We'll make sure it gets done right. And if I say no, Jack stood up, then you say no. I'll leave this office and we'll never speak again. You'll try to force my mother out through legal means or intimidation or whatever other schemes you have planned, and maybe you'll succeed. But more likely you'll fail, and the people you owe money to will come collect. Either way, you'll have to live with the choices you made. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. My father used to say that a man's character isn't defined by what he does when things are easy. It's defined by what he does when things are impossible. Right now, you're at impossible. What you do next is going to define the rest of your life. Jack left Brandon standing at the window and took the elevator down to the parking garage. He'd done what he came to do. The rest was out of his hands. He was halfway to his motorcycle when he heard running footsteps behind him. Wait! Jack turned. Brandon had followed him, down still in his expensive suit, but breathing hard, his carefully styled hair falling across his forehead. I need to show you something, Brandon said. Before I give you an answer, there's someone you should meet. 20 minutes later, Jack followed Brandon's Mercedes through North Scottsdale to a neighborhood of Spanish-style mansions behind gates and walls. Brandon pulled into a circular driveway in front of a house that probably cost more than Jack would make in 10 lifetimes. Victoria and I are separated, Brandon said as they walked to the front door. Have been for 2 weeks since the incident at the diner. She's filed for divorce, taking half of everything I have left, which isn't much, but it's something. I'm not here to talk about your marriage. I know, but you need to understand something about Victoria, about why she is the way she is. Brandon unlocked the door and led Jack through a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything was white and cream and perfectly arranged, not a single item out of place. It felt more like a museum than a home. In the living room, Victoria sat on a white leather couch staring at a laptop screen. She looked different without the makeup and designer clothes. Smaller, younger, almost vulnerable. She looked up when they entered and her eyes went wide with recognition and fear. What is he doing here? She demanded, closing the laptop. He's here because I asked him to be, Brandon said. Victoria, I need you to tell him about your mother. Absolutely not. That's none of his business. It is if we want any chance of fixing this. Victoria's face hardened. There's nothing to fix. We're done, Brandon. You and me, this marriage, all of it. I'm taking my settlement and moving to California. You can deal with your problems alone. Jack cleared his throat. I went to see Lorraine. Victoria's head snapped toward him. What? Your mother. Lorraine Pemberton, at Sunset Valley Nursing Home in Oklahoma. I drove out there a few nights ago. We talked. The color drained from Victoria's face. You had no right. She thinks you visit her for Christmas? Jack continued, his voice even. She thinks you call her and tell her about your glamorous life? She has whole conversations in her head with a daughter who doesn't exist because the real one abandoned her 7 years ago. Victoria stood up, shaking. Get out. Get out of my house. She's dying, Victoria. The nurses give her maybe 6 months, and she's going to die thinking you were just too busy to visit, too important, too successful to spare time for your own mother. You don't understand. I understand that when you look at old people, you see your future. I understand that you're terrified of ending up like your mother, so you punish anyone who reminds you of what you're running from. I understand that when you shoved my mother, you weren't really attacking her. You were attacking that fear. Victoria's hands were shaking now. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to hold something in. I can't, she whispered. I can't go see her. I can't watch her die. Why not? Because she'll know I abandoned her. She'll know I haven't visited in 7 years. She'll know I'm a terrible daughter and a terrible person, and she'll die hating me. The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. Victoria collapsed back onto the couch, her perfect facade crumbling. She doesn't hate you, Jack said quietly. She doesn't even remember you abandoned her. The stroke damaged her memory. In her mind, you're still the perfect daughter she raised, still beautiful and successful and good. She has no idea what you've become. Victoria looked up at him, mascara running down her cheeks. Then why should I go if she's happy in her delusion? Why destroy it? Because she's not happy. She's lonely. She's dying alone in a room that smells like medicine, and the only comfort she has is a lie she tells herself about a daughter who loves her. You can't give her back the 7 years you stole, but you can give her the truth. You can show up and hold her hand and let her know that at the end she wasn't alone. Victoria covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Brandon sat down beside his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and for a moment his hand hovered over her shoulder. Then he withdrew it. "She's right to divorce me," Brandon said to Jack. "I enabled this, her cruelty, her fear. I let her turn into someone neither of us recognizes because it was easier than confronting the truth. We're both cowards, both running from things we should face." Jack looked at these two broken people in their perfect house and felt something unexpected pity. "You can keep running," he said, "or you can stop. It's that simple and that hard." He walked to the door, then paused. "I'm taking my mother to the care facility site in Flagstaff tomorrow. If you want to be part of building something that matters instead of destroying it, meet us there. 2 o'clock. If you don't show up, I'll know you chose to keep running." Jack left them in that white empty house and rode his Harley into the desert sunset. The next day was one of those perfect Arizona autumn days, 75 degrees cloudless sky, the kind of weather that made people forget how brutal the summer had been. Jack pulled up to the empty lot on Pinecrest Lane in Flagstaff at 1:30. The land stretched out in front of him, scrub brush and red dirt with the mountains rising in the distance. Martha's house sat at the edge of the property, a modest ranch-style home with blue shutters and a porch swing that Henry McAllister had built 46 years ago. Martha was sitting on that swing now, Grace beside her. "Is he coming?" Martha asked as Jack approached. "I don't know, Mama. I hope so. And if he doesn't, then we find another way. We always do." At 1:50, a black Mercedes pulled up. Brandon got out wearing jeans and a work shirt instead of his usual suit. He looked nervous. At 1:55, a white Range Rover arrived. Victoria stepped out and Jack almost didn't recognize her. No makeup, hair in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater. They walked toward the group together, but not touching, two people occupying the same space but living in different worlds. Brandon stopped in front of Martha, and for a long moment nobody spoke. Then Brandon dropped to one knee. "Mrs. McAllister," he said, his voice rough. "I came here 2 weeks ago, and I hurt you. I put my hands on you. I said terrible things. I made you bleed, and I broke something precious to you. And I did it because I was desperate and scared, and I thought you were an easy target." Martha watched him, her face unreadable. "I can't undo what I did," Brandon continued. "I can't give you back the dignity I tried to take. But I can tell you that I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry. And I can promise that I will spend however long it takes making this right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. He held it up so Martha could see it. $200,000 made out to the Pinecrest Community Trust. "This is everything I have left after settling my debts," Brandon said. "Every liquid asset I could scrape together. It's yours, to buy your house, to build the care facility, to create something good out of the mess I made." Martha took the check with trembling hands. She stared at it for a long time. "Why?" she asked finally. "Because Jack McAllister gave me something I didn't deserve and probably don't have the strength to live up to. He gave me a second chance, and I'm going to do everything in my power not to waste it." Martha looked at Jack, then at Grace, then back at Brandon. "Stand up," she said. Brandon stood. Martha stepped forward and did something that made Jack's throat constrict. She hugged him. It wasn't a long hug. It wasn't particularly warm. But it was forgiveness offered freely to someone who hadn't earned it. "We all make mistakes," Martha said quietly. "The question is what we do after. You're choosing to do better. That's enough." Brandon's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Victoria stood apart watching this exchange with an expression Jack couldn't read. When Martha released Brandon and turned to her, Victoria took a step back. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Victoria said quickly. "I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted to say that I'm going to Oklahoma today. I'm going to see my mother, and I'm going to tell her the truth about everything." "That's a start," Martha said. "It's more than that. It's the first honest thing I've done in 7 years." Victoria's voice broke. "I don't know how to be a good person. I've spent so long being cruel and shallow and fake that I don't know if there's anything real left underneath. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be someone my mother can be proud of before she dies." Grace stepped forward and held out her hand. Victoria looked at it like she didn't understand the gesture. "I'm Grace," she said. Jack's daughter. I'm a cardiologist. I volunteer with hospice patients sometimes. If you want, I can come with you to Oklahoma. Help you navigate those final conversations. Victoria stared at the offered hand, tears streaming down her face. Then she took it. Why would you help me? She whispered. Because my mother died of cancer 5 years ago, and I had the chance to say goodbye. You deserve that chance too. The two women stood there, hands clasped, and Jack felt the weight of his wife's wisdom settling over the moment. Sarah had always believed in the power of small kindnesses, the way a single gesture could crack open a hardened heart. Okay, Brandon said, pulling himself together. Let's talk logistics. We have $512,000 total. The house is worth $520, so we're $8,000 short. I can cover $8,000, said a voice behind them. They all turned. Sheriff Morrison stood at the edge of the property, leaning against his patrol car, arms crossed. Tom, Jack said, surprised, what are you doing here? Heard about the community meeting. Heard about what you're trying to do. Morrison pushed off the car and walked toward them. Martha McAllister served my family dinner every Tuesday for 3 years after my wife left me. Never judged, never pried, just made sure my kids and I had a hot meal and some kindness. I owe her. So I'm in for $8,000. He handed Brandon a check. Brandon stared at it, then at the group assembled on this empty lot and laughed. It was a sound of disbelief and wonder. Okay, he said. Okay, we have the full amount. Now we just have to build the damn thing. Over the next 3 weeks, Jack watched something remarkable happen. Brandon Ashford threw himself into the Pinecrest project with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He was on site every day at 6 in the morning, working alongside the construction crews he'd hired. He learned to frame walls, to pour concrete, to do the physical labor he'd spent his life avoiding. The first time Jack saw him with blisters on his hands and dirt under his fingernails, Brandon had grinned like a kid. I'm actually building something, he'd said with wonder. With my own hands, not just signing checks and attending meetings, actually creating something. Victoria went to Oklahoma. She stayed for 2 weeks sitting at her mother's bedside, holding her hand, telling her the truth about the last 7 years. Jack didn't know all the details, but Grace reported that it had been painful and necessary and healing in ways Victoria hadn't expected. Lorraine died 3 weeks after Victoria's visit with her daughter beside her, finally knowing the truth, but also knowing she was loved. Victoria came back to Arizona changed, quieter, stripped of the aggressive facade she'd worn like armor. She volunteered at the construction site, bringing coffee and lunch for the workers, learning their names, treating them like human beings for maybe the first time in her life. The divorce still went through. Some things were too broken to fix, but Brandon and Victoria remained friends, bound together by the shared experience of becoming better people. Grace worked with local doctors to set up the medical protocols for the care facility. She recruited specialists in Parkinson's treatment, brought in equipment, created a program that would serve not just Flagstaff, but the entire county. And Martha supervised it all from her porch swing, watching her house become the foundation of something bigger than one family's history. Watching broken people put themselves back together through the simple act of building something for others. Jack fixed motorcycles and showed up every evening to check on the progress, and sat with his mother while she told stories about his father. Henry would have loved this, Martha said one night as they watched the sun set over the construction site. He always said the best buildings are the ones that bring people together. We're calling it the Henry and Sarah Memorial Care Center, Jack said. If that's okay with you. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Your father and your wife, together in something good. Yes, Jackie, that's more than okay. The grand opening happened on a Saturday in March, 6 months after that terrible day in Betty's diner. 200 people showed up. Veterans, local residents, families who'd already signed up to move their loved ones into the facility. The mayor gave a speech. Brandon gave a speech that focused more on thanking the community than promoting himself. And Martha, wearing both angel brooches, the new one Jack had given her, and the old one he'd painstakingly repaired, soldered back together with silver stronger than the original, cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded, and Jack stood beside his daughter, his arm around her shoulders, watching his mother smile wider than she had in years. Grace was 7 months pregnant now, her belly round under a spring dress. She leaned into her father's side. We did it, she said. You did most of it, Jack corrected. The money you gave, the medical expertise, the compassion you showed Victoria. I learned it from watching you. You learned it from your mother. Maybe we learned it from both of you. Grace put her hand on her belly. And maybe we'll teach it to her. Her, Grace smiled. It's a girl. I found out last week. I was waiting for the right time to tell you. Jack felt his chest constrict. A granddaughter. Sarah's legacy continuing in a new generation. Does she have a name? Sarah Martha McAllister Stone. If that's okay. Jack couldn't speak. He just pulled his daughter closer and blinked back tears. Around them, people toured the new facility. The bright, clean rooms, the therapy center, the community space where residents could gather. The garden Martha had designed full of desert flowers that could survive the harsh Arizona climate. Brandon found Jack as the crowd began to thin. I wanted to thank you, Brandon said, for everything, for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one, for teaching me that there's more to life than profit margins and legacy. You taught yourself, Jack said. I just pointed you in the right direction. Still, you saved my life. Literally. The people I owed money to, they would have killed me if I couldn't pay. This project, what we built here, it gave me a way out. More than that, it gave me a purpose. He paused, looking out at the facility. I'm starting a new company, nonprofit development, building care facilities and community centers in underserved areas. No more luxury condos or shopping centers. Just places that actually help people. Victoria's coming on board. She wants to focus on facilities for the elderly, make up for the years she wasted running from aging. That's good, Jack said. That's really good. We're calling it second chance development because that's what this is, what you gave us. Brandon extended his hand. Jack shook it. Some wounds heal, some don't. But the ones that do, they leave scars that remind us of who we were and who we chose to become. That evening, after the crowds had left and the sun had set, Jack sat with Martha on the porch of her house. The house she'd kept. The house that was now surrounded by something bigger and better than either of them had imagined. Your father would be proud of you, Martha said, squeezing Jack's hand. I think he'd be proud of both of us. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the desert sounds. Crickets, wind through the brush, the distant howl of a coyote. Jackie, Martha said eventually, can I tell you something? Anything, Mama. I'm glad it happened. Not the assault, not the cruelty, but everything after, because it brought you back to me. It brought you back to Grace. It reminded you that you're allowed to live even after losing someone you love. Jack felt the truth of her words settle into his bones. Sarah would have liked this, he said quietly. What we built here, the second chances, the forgiveness. She would have loved it, because that's who she was, someone who believed people could be better than their worst moments. I miss her every day. I know you do, baby, but missing someone doesn't mean you have to stop living. It just means you carry them with you while you keep going. Jack looked at his mother at the angel brooches pinned to her collar, the old and the new, the broken and the whole, together. How did you do it? He asked. After Dad died. How did you keep going? Martha smiled. I had you, I had purpose, and I had faith that even though the person I loved was gone, the love itself wasn't. Love doesn't die when people do, Jackie. It just changes form. It becomes memory. It becomes the lessons they taught us. It becomes the strength we find to keep going. She patted his hand. Sarah's not gone. She's in Grace's eyes. She's in the granddaughter you're about to meet. She's in every choice you make to be kind instead of cruel, to show mercy instead of revenge. That's her legacy. And it's beautiful. Jack sat with that thought as the stars came out bright against the dark desert sky. His phone buzzed. A text from Grace. Come to the community center. There's something you need to see. Jack helped Martha to her feet, and they walked slowly across the grounds to the main building. The lights were on inside, warm and welcoming. Grace met them at the door, her face glowing. Everyone wanted to do something special, she said. A surprise. She led them into the main community room. The walls had been painted a soft cream color, and hanging on them were photographs. Dozens of them. Old photos of Flagstaff, of the families who'd lived in the neighborhood over the decades, of the community that had come together to make this place possible. And in the center, a large portrait. Henry McAllister and Sarah McAllister, side by side, their photos enlarged and framed together. Below it, a plaque, in memory of Henry Augustus McAllister and Sarah Catherine McAllister, builders of families, communities, and love that endures. Martha's hand went to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. This is for you, Grandma, Grace said, for everything you've sacrificed, for everything you've taught us about strength and grace and never giving up. This is your legacy, and Dad's, and Mom's, all together. Martha reached for Jack with one hand and Grace with the other, pulling them close. This, she whispered, this is what family is. Not blood, not obligation, but choice. Choosing every day to show up for each other, to build something good out of the broken pieces, to love even when it hurts. And they stood there together, 3 generations, bound by loss and love, and the determination to keep building, keep growing, keep choosing hope over despair. Outside the desert, night deepened. Inside, the lights burned bright, a beacon for anyone who needed shelter care, a second chance. Jack felt something shift in his chest. The weight he'd been carrying for 5 years, the grief that had made every breath painful, didn't disappear. It would never disappear. But it lightened, transformed into something bearable. Sarah was gone. His father was gone. But their love remained written into every brick of this building, every life it would touch, every family it would help. That was enough. That was more than enough. 3 months later, on a warm May morning, Grace gave birth to a 7-pound baby girl with dark eyes and a powerful set of lungs. Jack held his granddaughter for the first time in a hospital room filled with flowers and felt the circle complete itself. Life continuing. Love multiplying. The next chapter beginning. Hello, Sarah, Martha, he whispered to the baby. I'm your grandfather, and I'm going to tell you stories about the 2 amazing women you're named after, about their strength and their kindness, and the way they changed the world just by being in it. The baby yawned, unimpressed. Jack laughed. Martha sat in the chair beside the bed, watching her son hold his grandchild, and smiled. Her hands trembled more now. The Parkinson's progressed slowly but steadily. But she was here. She'd lived to see this moment. Grace, exhausted but radiant, watched them all with tears in her eyes. We made it, she said softly, through all the pain and loss and fear. We made it to the other side. We did, Jack agreed, and we'll keep making it, one day at a time, one choice at a time, together. The baby grasped his finger with surprising strength. Jack felt his heart expand to accommodate this new love, adding it to all the others he carried. Life breaks everyone. His mother had taught him that. But the broken places, if you let them heal right, they become the strongest parts. Jack McAllister had been broken by war, by grief, by loss. But he'd been put back together by love, his mother's, his daughter's, his wife's memory, and now this tiny new person who represented the future. He was scarred. He was weathered. But he was whole. And that was more than enough. Outside the hospital window, the Arizona sun climbed higher in a cloudless sky. Inside, a family gathered close, celebrating new life and remembering those who'd passed, understanding. Finally, that love doesn't end when people die. It just changes form. It becomes memory. It becomes strength. It becomes the foundation we build on when we're ready to start again. And Jack McAllister, the Reaper, who learned to choose mercy over revenge, was ready. He was finally completely ready to live, to love, to build something good from the broken pieces. The angel brooches, old and new, broken and whole, caught the morning light from Martha's collar, glinting like promises kept, like hope renewed, like family enduring through everything, stronger than steel and more precious than gold. The end was just another beginning, and they were all ready for it, together.